Type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
A very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. My name is Emilliano. From tonight, the mayhem in London. What lessons can Uganda borrow from this chaos as far as law and order is concerned? London, Britain's capital city, has been under unprecedented chaos for 3 days now, resulting in mass destruction of property and loss of life. The mayhem is said to have resulted from the cold-blooded shooting of one Mark Duggan, prompting Londoners, especially immigrants, to riot, leading to mass looting and arson. Police reports said that Mark Duggan, a black man suspected of criminal activities, opened fire at a police patrol car. However, a panel of independent experts has concluded that Duggan did not fire a single bullet, leading to the conclusion that the police was trigger-happy and could have killed Duggan through a rash decision. The rioting in London has become a major reference point for all law enforcement agencies in the world, especially in countries where the masses are agitating for the right to assemble or even demonstrate. Uganda is still struggling to put in place a law on public order, and a recent draft was challenged by the opposition and human rights activists who argued that it was draconian. The Ugandan police force has also repeatedly come under fire for being brutal, and many people are now asking the police force to take lessons from the UK police that did not use any firepower to deal with the rioters, despite the damage they were causing. The London riots came at a time when the Agents for Change or FOC pressure group had just announced that they will be resuming the walk-to-work protests, which resulted in the death of 10 people the last time. So tonight we look at what is happening in London to take lessons therefrom, and but specifically looking at it from the perspective of public order management as well as human rights. Our guests tonight, Mr. Livingstone Sewanyana, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative, is online in Mukono. He'll be joining us on this show. But in the studio with me right now I have Mr. Emilliano Kayiima, Police Political Commissar, also spokesman for the Lands Police Protection Unit, but is Political Commissar in charge of the Kampala Metropolitan Police. You're most welcome, Mr. Kayiima.
Thank you.
We are also joined on the line from London by Mr. Richard Mulindwa Kayiima. Richard is a Ugandan journalist working with the Observer newspaper. At the moment he's doing his master's degree at the University of London. You're welcome, Richard. Okay, we have Richard on the line. He'll be talking to us as we kick off this show. Richard, are you with us tonight? Richard, this is Spectrum. Are you with us? All right, that line is going to be checked right now. In the meantime, let me talk to you, Mr. Kayiima. How would you explain the mayhem in London? They've been saying London is burning. What has gone wrong?
Well, I'm not a Londoner. Those who are in London would explain it better. Now that my friend Richard is there, I think it will give us a picture. There is a lot that we are reading from the papers, from the net. It's not good news to us, to the sane world. But of course that is an indication that there are questions that are hurting, especially to the young people who are majorly involved in this, and the answers must be found by those who are in charge, by everybody. And every nation must learn its lessons and put its house in order. We have not slept. We also keep watch of that, pick every lesson possible from that, and we would want to implore our people not really to pride in wrongs, in acts of criminality, but to find out what these are and put our houses in order for a better future, for a better tomorrow, for a better posterity. Yes.
Mr. Kayiima, as political commissar, you basically are in charge of creating a good relation, I believe, with the civilian, the citizenry.
Correct.
You would understand the workings, the mindset, the psychology of the police as it interlinks with the civilian people. Where would it go wrong?
Hello?
All right. Okay, let me interrupt you there. Let's hear from you. Richard Mulindwa Kayiima, Ugandan journalist working with the Observer newspaper, right now doing his master's at the University of London. You're welcome, Richard, to Spectrum. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
You're welcome to Spectrum. Okay. We can hear you, Richard.
Hello?
Yes, you're welcome to Spectrum, Richard.
Oh, yes, perhaps you can speak up a bit. I can barely hear you. But,
Okay,
yes, thank you.
Can you hear me now, Richard?
Yes, that's much better.
How is London today? Where are you to begin with?
Well, I'm in the southeast of London, specifically I'm in a place called New Cross.
And what's the situation where you are and elsewhere in London, Greater London?
Yeah, I think the last 2 days have seen some good improvement in the security situation here. It was very bad from the weekend also to Tuesday, but yesterday and today and a bit of Tuesday evening, the situation has been improving. So where I am now, and I was out in central London yesterday, the situation has been steadily improving. You now have visible presence of the police, but nothing really to trouble you as you go about your business.
All right, Richard, you are a journalist. Let's try to go to the roots of this problem. The Prime Minister says poor parenting has caused this problem, which is a long-term thing. That means they would have ignored something for maybe 30 years or so. But community leaders have said inequality, 1, 2, cuts to public services, and youth unemployment are a major problem. 1,000 people have been arrested. How would you explain it, Richard?
Well, it's very difficult to explain because on the one hand, you do have those concerns which have been expressed by the opposition, by the community groups, and really across the country there is a lot of discomfort with the level of spending cuts that the Conservative government is undertaking now. So there is that concern that, for instance, to cut the police, which will amount to about 20% of the police budget, people are telling you, and even the people inside the police, they are telling you that this is affecting police morale, it's increasing the workload of the police, and it's certainly going to affect the police's capacity to, maintain law and order. But on the other hand, you have what seems like long-term causes. I mean, youth unemployment is a big issue, and then family breakdown. I think it's a combination of all these factors. And when you look at family breakdown, for instance, I was speaking to a Ugandan here, and she did tell me that there is a big problem in this country in that the parents appear to have been deprived of their primary responsibility to ensure the discipline of their children. So children as young as 7 can be taken into care if, for instance, it's found that you probably gave your son a little bit of punishment, to put it mildly anyway. If it is found that you punished your child in a way that the authorities do not approve of, your child can be taken away from you, and you can run into all sorts of problems. And I think that's a major concern, and it sort of suggests that what the children are doing in their families is also what they're doing out on the streets.
That's a very, very interesting perception, Richard. Let's look at your own perception of this. Is that more poignant than youth unemployment, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, youth unemployment really is, it's a big issue, but it's a big issue in America, it's a big issue in Uganda. So, yes, it is, and you do not want to simply, explain it away that way, because I think at the end of the day, you have to remember that this was not an organized group. This was not, for instance, when we had the demonstrations against the university tuition fees, some of which, of course, degenerated into violence. So this was sort of an explosion of violence that has not been seen. And some people have explained it in such a way that it's really an explosion of those underlying forces, because if at the end of the day how you solve your problems, how you handle problems is determined by the totality of the means available to you, and if violence is one of those means that is readily available to you, if disrespecting the police is something that, if you have no respect for any sort of authority, then nothing will prevent you from just burning a furniture shop and just, torching a car for which the owner has not, done anything against you. So it's very, very complex situation, but I think the underlying problems need to be addressed. But I think you also need to think that the kind of society that these children are growing in, to be in a situation where they have nothing to lose, does raise a lot of concern.
Very interesting perception there again, Richard. Let's look at the loss of parental authority over these children. One of the reports that I'm looking at now say that in some cases parents had actually joined their children to go looting in these shops. Try to paint a picture for us, Richard, about this breakdown in authority at home.
Yes, exactly, and I think that was now the other dimension that comes in, because while my Ugandan correspondent was complaining that, having been raised in Uganda where, you have to respect authority, where you have to respect the teachers, it's not exactly the situation. I've heard of, someone who trained as a teacher and went to teach, and now they're working in a bar because they just couldn't stand the level of disrespect, the level of, aggression from, 15 and 16-year-olds. But behind that, you also need to think, if that parent does not feel that they have the necessary room to shape the behavior of their children, there are also many other cases where people are going to accuse that where are the parents, because then you have a lot of family breakdown, you have families in all sorts of trouble, divorce, and very high rates of that. So while some parents do not have the room to shape their children's behavior, others will ask, but where are the parents? Are they there? So that's also another dimension to to look at, and which is where policy maybe becomes important, because some people have been agitating that the government should make sure that the conditions, encourage families, encourage people to stay together. But I think those are very, very complex policy and societal issues that probably when the fires have died down, Britain will have to really think hard about.
Richard, very briefly, this breakdown in authority, what does it mean? A British child cannot be caned at all by the parent, or even pinched.
Pardon?
What does this really mean in practice? A British parent cannot cane their child. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very complex situation. Of course, you can't easily just spank your child. And I was speaking to a business executive yesterday, and she was telling me that when she was growing up, she knew that if she did something that was absolutely unacceptable, she could get she called it, some bit of punishment. Now, if you did that, with your child today, if your child reported you to the police, I mean, you could lose your child to, could be taken into care, and you could, as much as, face persecution. And so it's a complex situation, and the overall impression you get is that parents are in a scenario where they're almost too scared to prevent their children from, getting out of hand.
Right. So basically, it's really the tail wagging the dog this time. The parents are afraid of their children. The parent could begin to beg the child for mercy if they are being led to the police station.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and because the children, I think they're increasingly losing that sense of fear. It's like the children tend to believe they can do anything, and what will the parents do?
Right.
And so eventually it spreads out, because it says, so what will the teacher do?
Okay.
And so eventually it's like, what will the police do? So I can go and ban that shop. But having said that, of course, you always want to make sure that you get the right balance, because on the other hand, just this week we had a woman who was sentenced to, I think, up to 36 years in prison because she killed her children, I think aged 3 and 2, because she fell out with their father. So at the same time, you want to make sure you get the right balance. The parents have the room to parent, but also that children get protected from wayward parents. So it's a very delicate balance that you need to achieve. Okay,
Richard, I would like us to talk about the public order management, but very, very briefly. Can you link this to us in the fate of religion in England? Religion, I mean, the role of religion in society, the fear of God. The children, if they have the fear of God in them, they probably won't do this kind of thing. Is there a connection with a breakdown of religion? Very briefly.
Well, I think that's a very subjective issue, and because I mean, in this society, I mean, its religion becomes it's not exactly like, when we were young, where, religion was very much at the heart of the family, very much at the heart of the school, and almost even at the heart of the state. So it's a characteristic of, postmodernistic societies that religion is sort of relegated from, public life. And it's the same here. So I don't even think that in the context of this society,
it's already dropped.
I don't even think religion comes in.
All right, it was dropped a long time ago.
They're trying to, society today, not only they, society, many modern societies are trying to replace religion with kind of
humanism,
kind of good manners and decency. And whereas I think the difference might be that religion could hardly be questioned, secularism is open to all kinds of questions. So maybe it's not as powerful as religion was in ensuring that at least children, at least until they were a little older, that they achieved, a certain level of minimum good behavior. So I think religion probably wouldn't exactly fit into the equation in this context.
Well, because it died a long time ago, it seems. Incidentally, one of the titles of the Queen is Defender of the Faith, meaning the Christian faith. Very briefly, Richard, before we go, where was the police when all this was happening? Through 4 days of rioting.
Well, that's one of the questions that people have been asking, and at first there were quite a small number of police officers out on the streets because, this seemed like a small issue. It seems like a very issue domestic to Tottenham, where, the initial shooting of Mark Duggan took place. But as it emerged that, other areas of London were also being engulfed by this level of, looting and wanton destruction, the police numbers increased. But even after that, people are sort of, the impression you get is that the police did not have the necessary kind of room to use the necessary force to ensure that these what I can really call criminals that they were dealt with. And I think that's it's a difficult issue for the police here, because just the other day one of them was told he was going to face manslaughter charges because he had happened to push a newspaper seller who eventually died, and investigations concluded that he died because of that push. So the police here have been sort of, they have caught between a rock and a hard place.
They're acting with restraint.
But I think it was also a problem of interpretation, because this was not an organized demonstration, organized around a central issue. This was a small issue, a little issue, which is a private family issue, a community issue, which gets hijacked by gangs which are coordinated, and they're using social media to say, let's go and do it in Lewisham, let's go to Peckham, let's go here, can you get me a fridge, can you make sure you get ABC? So it was eventually a crime, a scene of a crime, which was being, I think, treated as an issue of conventional public disorder. But I think now, lessons will be learned from this, and you get a sense that if police, for instance, maybe have to use some more robust means, I think if this kind of thing were to happen, I think the police would be wiser.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Mulindo Kayiima is a Ugandan journalist working with the Observer newspaper, currently doing his master's at the University of London. Thank you very much indeed, Richard. We're going for a break now. We'll come back and talk to Mr. Emilliano Kayiima as soon as we get back. Do stay tuned.
Let's show you how to multiply your savings, starting with the cash beneath the mattress to the savings in the bank that aren't making money. Let's turn your savings into somethings with Super Save Reloaded. Super Save Reloaded brings you savings and investment accounts which offer you a sure and predictable way to multiply your savings. For more information about Super Save Reloaded, ask at your nearest Stanbic Bank branch.
Stanbic Bank, moving forward.
3 times a year, every year for the past 6 years, I have been stressed going to pay school fees. I've woken up at the crack of dawn, taken 2 taxis and a board. Finally arrived, filled out the forms. I have lined up between a guy with kavubuka and a guy with a nasty cough. And I've waited and waited, but no more now. I have moved on with MTN mobile money. So now I pay school fees directly from my mobile while I spend time with my children.
When you move on with MTN mobile money, your children can move on to greater things. And now everyone can pay school fees with MTN mobile money. So be one of the 100 people to win 100,000 shillings towards your next school shopping when you pay school fees with MTN mobile money.
MTN, everywhere you go.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90 is brought to you by Stanbic Bank.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. The mayhem is in London. What lessons can Uganda borrow from this chaos as far as law and order is concerned? Our guest tonight, Mr. Livingstone Sewanyana, Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. He's on the line from Mukono now. We also have in the studio Mr. Emilliano Kayiima, Political Commissar in charge of Kampala Metropolitan Police, also spokesperson for the Lands Police Protection Unit. We'll hear from both of them. But first of all, Mr. Sewanyana on the line from Mukono. You're welcome, Spectrum, sir. Hello? Okay, we don't seem to be able to get him. Let's come back to the studio. We'll get back to him later. Mr. Kayiima, you heard from this gentleman in London. Police caught in a rock and hard place. They were moving tentatively, hesitantly. Is that what they should have done? Or should they have moved a little bit more like the Ugandan police?
Well. When your neighbor's house is on fire, it would only be a night dancer to really celebrate that or laugh at it. It's unfortunate that it happened. I think there are lessons, lots of lessons that we can pick as Ugandans, as the Uganda police, as the world, and then put our house in order. I found this unfortunate and I complain about this every day. In this country, we rush to discuss symptoms and we don't look at the underlying factors, underlying issues. In this country, we know there are issues. In one of our magazines, the police magazines, I wrote about that, the silent war within, youth unemployment. It's there and it's rising. Social problems, value, moral value systems have broken down, and these things will take us on bit by bit, and one time it will, spread beyond what the police, what the law enforcement may be able to do. Now, when it happens, everybody will say, "But where was the police?" In London, you heard what Rimkava was saying, Mr. Kayiima. The police thought it was a simple thing, it was going to die out. Now it went out of hand. I'm sure, of course, we are not at the same level with the Londoners, with the Europeans. They've reached some level of enlightenment, but they also have, I think, inadequacies in their own way. He explained family systems have broken down. Children question the authority of their parents.
You can't clean them.
You cannot touch them.
If you tell him lie down, he'll say, "I'll call the police."
Here in this country, very many parents also blame us. You police, you have brought these laws that protect children. No, we don't make the laws. We enforce the laws. But those who are there may not oversee this. And when it finally comes on the streets, everybody would say, but the police was brutal. Really? Would we want to see Kampala on fire?
Okay.
That I think none of us would want to see this.
I would like you to talk to us a little bit later about the value system that you just underlined. But first of all, let's hear from Mr. Sewanyana. Good evening, Mr. Sewanyana.
Hello.
Good evening, sir.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. Good evening to you.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me back?
Yeah, but you are not loud enough.
Okay, I'll try to raise the voice. Can you tell us what your reading is of this chaos in London? London has been burning the past couple of days.
Well, it is regrettable what has happened in London. I learned of London burning when I was very young, and it's unfortunate that it is experiencing such a sad happening at the moment. But I think what is happening in London to a large extent reflects the current turmoil the world is engrossed in. As you know, we have just had a very unfortunate incident in Norway when out of nowhere so many lives were lost. And now what we are witnessing in London demonstrates that nothing can be taken for granted. Even a small minor incident can erupt into a serious and a very disturbing event. We must be aware that the world is facing a global recession, and at the bottom of it a lot of social injustice, and of course there are problems of unemployment. There is anger everywhere, and this in many cases can actually lead